One of the greatest challenges I face as a teacher of literature is getting students to understand and appreciate poetry for its own sake. Now, most of the time when we teach, we have all sorts of weird lures and ways to kind of wrap up literary concepts to make students more apt to kind of like internalize them. One of my main methods is pop culture, yada yada yada. But as far as the actual experience and the enjoyment and appreciation of poetry just for its own sake, that's some other type of mystery. One of the things that I would like to kind of start introducing more and more would be the idea of a personal relationship to a poem that sometimes goes completely beyond what its meaning might be. That instead I have a connection to a poem. I have a connection to a poet that goes beyond its interpretation. Like so many times in high school, I remember that people would teach us poems like there's an absolute correct interpretation. This is what it means. This is what it says. That's not necessarily the best way of going about, understanding what makes poetry really work. And so today I wanted to share something a little bit personal to kind of illustrate this point. I lost my father in a car accident last week, and there are plenty of people out there who understand that type of trauma and understand what it's like to lose someone so quickly and so suddenly and kind of just left to pick up the pieces. Now, at his funeral, I spoke, which was, obviously exceedingly difficult. But one of the things that I've used to kind of cope and process his death has been two of my favorite poems. And one much more so than the other, but the chief, and please forgive how kind of disjointed this video can be because, I'm still in the process of grief. Dylan Thomas, as a poet, is just a real headache to wrap your head to wrap your mind around, because a lot of his images kind of crash into each other and get really blurry, which is one of the main things I wrote about in my master's thesis. But one of the things that I absolutely love about him is the way that he can encompass all sorts of different emotions and, explore the complexity of those emotions. Now, I always hated the poem Dylan Thomas wrote, "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night." That's always the one that they make you memorize in freaking high school English literature. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Do not go gentle into that good night. I don't know, it just always bugged me. And it's funny because my father died in a car accident. He was alive, very much alive, when the end came for him. And so, oddly, that poem has a weird significance for me now, because my father didn't go gently into that good night. He raged against the dying of the light every day. He never succumbed to sickness and age the way that the father figure in "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night" is described. He never had to suffer that. So instead, for me, the poem that best exemplifies my kind of relationship and the kind of grief that I'm going through is more Thomas's poem, which I feel is far superior, even though he wrote it when he was younger, "And Death Shall Have No Dominion." I've read this poem before on this YouTube channel just because I liked it, because it made me feel hipsterish. But this poem now, for me, has so much more significance to it, because this poem, even though it conveys a lot of religious sentiment, it's more about spitting in death's eye. Death shall have no dominion. And it never comes out and illustrates that religious sentiment directly, but instead leaves it kind of a vague, almost pagan mysticism. And for me, the verse that was always the most heavy is the last one, although they're all fantastic. Really the last two. And I want to read the last two stanzas because, for me, again, I'm saying that a lot, but keep in mind, I am trying to illustrate that personal connection to poetry, that, that academic sort of research-oriented, this is what the poem means, doesn't always give us the best, relationship and the best, connection to the poem. And these last few stanzas really, in my opinion, bring him to life. And death shall have no dominion. Under the windings of the sea, they lying long shall not die windily. Twisting on racks when sinews give way, strapped to a wheel, yet they shall not break. Faith in their hands shall snap in two, and the unicorn evils run them through. Split all ends up, they shan't crack, and death shall have no dominion. My father basically worked himself to death. He was exhausted when his accident occurred. And so for me, this poem speaks as to the men who are broken and the men who ultimately were strapped to the wheel in almost a torturous way, the ones who were taken from us. Death will have no dominion over them. And death shall have no dominion. No more may gulls cry at their ears, or waves break loud on the seashores. Where blew a flower, may a flower no more lift its head to the blows of the rain, though they be mad and dead as nails. Heads of the characters hammer through daisies, break in the sun till the sun breaks down, and death shall have no dominion. My father was a fisherman, and so the gulls and the windings of the sea, all of these things bring a very odd weight for me. So, the last stanza brings with us a sense of kind of weird religious annihilation, which, for anyone who has suffered or has experienced that sudden death, you can't process, as it's unfolding. That's not due to sickness. That is due to a catastrophic accident or even violence. It is the world breaking apart. It is a lot of things that used to bring joy that might not anymore. The gulls crying at their ears. The characters hammer through daisies. For me, again, I was always perplexed by that line. And this could be a completely wrong interpretation, but at this point, I don't care. You can go straight to hell. I don't care. Heads of the characters hammer through daisies feels like a rising from the grave, the flowers around the grave. And the sun breaking down has that Book of Revelation feel to it. The sun blotted. All of it coming back to the idea of death having no dominion. Death will never have dominion over my father. He will not be broken slowly. He will not suffer. His dignity will not be robbed from him. He was strength, and he was fire, and he was anger, and he was joy to his last day. And so, that is all he will ever be. I appreciate it. Thank you.